In the wildest corner of North America, a chilling moment stunned even the most seasoned wildlife observers. A massive python had wrapped its coils around a full-grown female grizzly bear. And then something no one could have expected happened. A second grizzly, larger, louder, and desperate, came charging through the trees with a roar so powerful it shook the ground. What happened next was captured by a hidden trail cam and made even hardened rangers cry. This is not a story of fiction. It's one of instinct, love, and sacrifice, a moment when the laws of the wild were rewritten. The morning fog hung thick in the dense spruce forest of northern British Columbia. Ranger Emma Callahan adjusted her binoculars from her perch in the observation blind, scanning the valley below. She had been tracking a bonded pair of grizzlies for months now, a male she nicknamed Bramble and a female called Sage. They were unusual, not just for their closeness but for how gentle Bramble was around her. He'd often share food with her, nuzzle her awake, and even defend her from competing males. In over a decade of fieldwork, Emma had never seen a bond like it. But on this day, something felt off. Sage hadn't moved for several minutes. Her body lay partially hidden near a thicket, awkwardly contorted. Emma zoomed in. Then she saw it, thick, scaly muscle wound around Sage's torso. A python, not native, likely an escaped or released exotic pet that had adapted. A dangerous and rare invader in this region. It was enormous, at least 20 feet, coiled tightly, constricting Sage's rib cage. Her claws scratched weakly at the forest floor, her eyes were wild with panic. Emma's breath caught. Then, a blur of motion from the north tree line. Bramble thundered into view. He didn't hesitate. With a roar that shattered the stillness, he charged. The python didn't release Sage, instead, it tried to tighten. Bramble struck with all the weight of his 700-pound frame. He bit, clawed, tore. The forest echoed with fury. Emma gripped the edge of the blind, unable to look away. Sage let out a strangled cry, and Bramble, bleeding now from coils wrapped around his chest, bit down into the python's neck with a roar so loud it scattered birds from trees miles away. It was a sound of love, of desperation, and it had only just begun. The python thrashed in agony, its tail flailing violently as Bramble's teeth sank deeper. Emma had never seen a bear fight with such ferocity, not even during dominance battles. Bramble's claws shredded the python's muscle, but the snake's grip on Sage didn't loosen. Instead, it began to constrict tighter, desperate and dying. Sage's body twitched under the pressure. Her eyes rolled back. Her chest barely moved. Emma knew time was running out. Bramble seemed to know too. With a final roar, he rose on his hind legs and slammed his full weight down onto the python's coils. Bones cracked. The snake's grip faltered. He tore again, this time with both paws, and the python's head snapped back. Blood sprayed across the snow. And then, silence. Sage gasped. The coils loosened. Bramble yanked the remains of the python off her body with his jaws and tossed it aside like rope. Then he circled her, pacing, grunting, nudging her with his snout. Emma could barely see through her tears. Sage tried to rise. She stumbled. Bramble steadied her with his shoulder, his body pressing close. Together, inch by inch, they moved toward the thicket, slowly, painfully, away from the battle, away from the broken body of the python. Emma radioed in the emergency, her voice shaking. Possible exotic predator confirmed. Grizzly female injured. Male protected her. Repeat, he saved her. Back in the brush, Sage collapsed again. Bramble lay down beside her. He didn't leave her side, not for an hour, not through the night. Emma watched it all, documenting, stunned and moved beyond words. Because what she had just witnessed, in blood and snow and breath, was not instinct. It was devotion. And it would cost Bramble more than anyone could imagine. The morning after the attack broke over the forest with a heavy silence. The snowfall had softened overnight, covering the battlefield in a fragile, undisturbed sheet of white, except for the blood trail leading from the clearing to the edge of the thicket. Emma hadn't slept. She'd stayed in the blind, her hands shaking around a thermos that had long gone cold. She watched as Bramble lifted his head at every distant sound, ears flicking, instincts raw. His side heaved with every breath, the deep gashes across his chest crusted in dark red. Sage lay curled beside him, breathing shallow but steady. He didn't sleep. He didn't hunt. He didn't wander. He just stayed. Emma observed closely, documenting with her camera and field notes. But what her pen couldn't capture, what her lens couldn't fully express, was the change in Bramble's posture. The proud bear she had studied for months, the one who once stood so tall, now held himself low and tight, wounded and protective. Late in the afternoon, Sage stirred. She tried to stand but collapsed again. Bramble immediately responded, nudging her neck, licking the side of her face with slow, deliberate care. Her paw twitched. Her eyes fluttered open. And for a moment, the fog seemed to lift between them. Emma held her breath. Then, for the first time in almost a day, Sage let out a soft, hoarse growl, not a warning, but a whisper. A recognition. Bramble licked her ear once more and then, with a grunt, rose shakily to his feet. He turned toward the tree-line. Emma recognized the look. He was going to find food, and he was barely able to walk. His front left paw dragged through the snow, stiff and likely sprained. His ribs rose unevenly. The long tear on his side reopened with the movement, staining the snow beneath him as he limped away. Emma grabbed her binoculars, tracking him as far as she could. "He's bleeding out," she whispered to no one. "He's not leaving her. He's risking himself for her." Hours passed. Twilight neared. Then, movement. Bramble returned. In his jaws, he dragged a half-frozen carcass, a deer, likely scavenged. It wasn't much, but it was something. He dropped it beside Sage and began to tear strips of meat, nudging them toward her mouth. She didn't eat at first. But when she finally did, Bramble backed away and lay beside her again. And this time, when the cold deepened and snow returned to the air, Sage leaned into him, for warmth, for safety, for love. And Emma, watching from the shadows, wiped her face and whispered, "He's going to die for her. And he doesn't care. Because some wounds don't heal in the body. They heal in the choosing. In the staying. In the fight to not let someone go, even when the forest tries to take them." The snow fell harder that night. It coated the forest floor in thick silence, muffling every sound except the labored breath of the two grizzlies under the shelter of the thicket. Sage, still trembling but improving, lay tucked into the curve of Bramble's body. He was no longer shivering, not because he was warm, but because his body was beginning to slow. Emma had stayed at the blind through the storm, reluctant to abandon what she was witnessing. Her heater was failing, her fingers were stiff, but her eyes never left them. By dawn, the air had cleared. Light filtered down through the canopy, scattering shadows across the trail of trampled snow, blood, and broken branches left by Bramble's return. And there, in that small hollow, a story of devotion continued to unfold, in silence, in pain, and in sheer determination. Bramble hadn't moved in hours. Not to eat, not to reposition himself, not even to clean his wounds. Emma adjusted the scope of her lens. His breathing was shallow. One eye remained half open, clouded. The deep wound on his left side had frozen over, the blood turning dark and crusted. Infection was likely already setting in, and still he stayed. Sage, weaker but awake, nudged him occasionally. She licked at the matted fur of his chest. At times, she even stood shakily and pawed softly at the ground near his belly, urging him to respond. He didn't growl, didn't flinch, only exhaled. Emma couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her radio. Ranger Callahan, dispatch. I need wildlife emergency services at Grid 9C. Injured Grizzly, possibly both. Immediate response. A voice crackled back. Copy. Air teams grounded for another 12 hours due to weather. Ground team can reach you by dawn. Understood, Emma said, then looked back through the lens. The time was running out. Sage nosed at Bramble's head, then lifted her own with a long, low moan, the kind of sound Emma had only heard when a mother bear lost a cub. It wasn't a cry of hunger or fear. It was mourning. Emma's hands trembled. She stepped away from the scope and simply watched with her eyes, heart pounding. Then, movement. Bramble stirred. His head lifted, just barely. He looked at Sage. Their eyes locked. She growled softly. He blinked once. Then he did something Emma didn't expect. He stood. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't strong. But Bramble pushed himself up onto all fours. His legs quivered beneath him. He swayed. He leaned against Sage, and then, slowly, he led her forward, away from the hollow, deeper into the trees, into cover, step by agonizing step. He knows help is coming, Emma said aloud. He's giving her the chance to be found. She followed from a distance, through binoculars and notes, tears streaking down her cheeks. He collapsed once. Got up again. Then again. Sage circled him, confused, frightened, but Bramble kept going. Not fast. Not far. But just far enough to lead her out of the thicket. Just far enough to be seen. That day, the price of loyalty wasn't measured in blood, it was measured in distance. In each painful step a bear took so his mate could live. The first sound that morning wasn't the wind. It was the unmistakable roar of a snowmobile in the distance, a low, steady grind of treads breaking frost, pushing through the tree-line. Emma sat upright in the blind, her radio crackling as the ground rescue team signaled arrival. Unit 2 approaching Sector 9C, a voice said. Visual contact with Ranger Base imminent. Emma exhaled slowly. She looked down at the clearing where Sage now stood, head raised, ears twitching. Her fur was dull, patchy with dried blood, but her posture was more stable. She was alert. Watchful. Alive. Bramble was behind her, collapsed again. His chest barely moved. His body was coated in snow where he hadn't shaken it off. Emma had watched him fight to walk for hours the day before, and she had watched him fail again and again, until even his breathing seemed like a labor. He hadn't tried to stand since before dawn. As the rescue team arrived, 2 wildlife medics and a tranquilizer expert, Emma met them with urgency. They're bonded, she warned. You go near her, he'll react. But he's injured badly? I don't think he has much time. Can he be moved? Asked the medic, pulling out a syringe. I doubt he'll let you near her unless he knows she's safe. They approached carefully, slowly. Rifles holstered but ready only for sedation. Sage backed away at first, circling Bramble's body protectively. Her growls were soft, but fierce. Emma stepped closer, whispering softly, her voice shaking. It's okay, girl. Let them help. He's done everything he could. It's your turn now. The dart hit her flank cleanly. Sage staggered, then lay down beside Bramble, her breathing steadying. Bramble's ears twitched at the impact. His head raised, barely. His eyes found Sage again, and when she closed hers under sedation, he gave a single low sound from his throat, a groan. A goodbye. The medics worked quickly. They administered fluids, stabilized Sage's breathing, and lifted her with a stretcher designed for bear rescues. But when they turned to Bramble, one medic knelt and shook her head. He's going into systemic shock. His heartbeat's irregular. He's not going to survive the ride. Emma crouched beside him. His eyes were glassy now, blinking slowly, focused on something far beyond the moment. He knew, she whispered. He led her here. He gave up everything so she could live. The second medic stood quietly, cap in hand. We have to make a decision, he said. We can't let him suffer. Emma looked into Bramble's face. There was no fear. No resistance. Only the silent, unbearable weight of a creature who had made peace with the wild. She nodded. They administered the injection gently, reverently. Emma placed her hand on his massive shoulder as the life slowly faded from his eyes. You did it, she whispered. You saved her. You loved her. Later, as the team airlifted Sage to the rehabilitation center, Emma remained in the forest. She dug a marker into the frozen soil with her gloved hands, a thick branch wrapped with cloth from her own pack. No plaque. No words. Only silence. Only memory. That day, a line was crossed, not between man and beast, but between what instinct demands and what love freely gives. And in that snowy glade, the wilderness whispered back, some sacrifices are sacred. The rehabilitation center sat on the edge of a vast preserve, carved into a pine-covered ridge, miles from the nearest town. It wasn't a zoo, there were no signs, no tickets, no visitors, just quiet enclosures, a dedicated veterinary staff, and acres of protected forest. A place where wildlife came not to be caged, but to heal. Sage arrived sedated, her breathing shallow, her vitals unstable. She was one of the few grizzlies ever rescued from a constrictor attack in the wild, perhaps the only one. The python's damage had been severe, torn muscle, cracked ribs, deep puncture wounds. She was severely dehydrated and in shock. The team worked through the night. Sage's size and strength made sedation dangerous. Every hour mattered. They cleaned the wounds, stitched the worst lacerations, and applied cold packs to reduce swelling. X-rays showed no spine damage, but her breathing was irregular. For days, she refused food. At first, she barely moved, her golden fur matted and dulled, her body shrinking under stress and grief. And all the while, Emma stayed nearby, not as a ranger now, but as something else, a witness, a mourner, a friend. She kept vigil outside the enclosure every morning before her shift. Sage would lie in the corner, still as stone, eyes open but vacant. Emma spoke softly through the fence, "Hey girl, you're not alone." Sometimes she'd bring a pine branch from the forest. Sage never reacted, but Emma left them anyway, little symbols of a world Sage once knew, once loved. Especially him. The one who brought her here. The one who didn't make it back. Weeks passed. Then, one morning in mid-January, Sage stood on her own. The camera in her enclosure caught it, a slow, shaky rise. She leaned against a tree trunk, breathing heavily. And then she took a step. Just one, but it was enough. From that day forward, the healing was slow but constant. She began to eat again, small portions, mostly berries and lean meat. Her weight stabilized. Her fur grew back, clean and glossy. She started to explore the edges of her space, sniffing trees, rolling in dry leaves, rubbing against logs. But most remarkably, she began to vocalize again, low, soft grumbles. Lonely at first. Then sharper. Curious. Alive. The staff believed she might one day return to the wild. They debated relocation zones, monitored her behavior. But Emma knew something had changed forever. Sage wasn't just healing from wounds. She was grieving. Late one evening, as snow fell quietly across the trees outside the center, Emma left something by the fence line. Not food, or tools, or medicine. A rock. Flat. Smooth. She carved one word into it with her ranger knife, bramble. The next morning it was gone. Moved. Not far, just nestled into a pile of leaves Sage had built near her shelter. And on the camera, just before dawn, she was seen lying beside it, her great body rising and falling with each slow, peaceful breath. Recovery, Emma realized, isn't just returning to what was. It's learning to carry the memory of what can never be again. Spring arrived in slow pulses, melting snow, swollen rivers, and the scent of pine returning to the air. The mountains of British Columbia shed their icy armor, revealing fresh moss, cold streams, and fields that waited for paw prints. And for the first time in months, the gate to enclosure 3 creaked open. Sage stood at the threshold. She was stronger now, nearly at full weight, her coat rich and golden again. The scars on her side were still visible, reminders of the python's grip, but they no longer dictated her movements. She walked with purpose, with steadiness. Emma stood beside the gate, clipboard forgotten in her hands. The forest beyond the clearing stretched into protected wilderness, 50,000 acres of terrain where no humans tread, except those who monitored at a distance. It was a second chance for animals who had survived what most never could. And it was time. Sage sniffed the wind. She looked back once, not at Emma, but at the rock still nestled near her shelter. The same flat stone, still etched with the name Bramble. It had remained untouched by the staff. Everyone knew better. It was hers. With a final grunt, Sage turned and stepped into the trees. The cameras followed her until she vanished into the forest, the sunlight catching the curve of her back as she moved uphill. Free. Unburdened. But not alone. Days passed. Then weeks. No sightings. The rangers assumed she had moved deeper into the valley, toward the river Bramble once used for fishing. There were no GPS trackers. Emma insisted on that. She doesn't belong to us, she told them. She never did. One afternoon, Emma returned to the ridge above the thicket, the same one from where she had first seen Bramble charging into battle, the python wrapped around Sage's body. Snow had long melted, and spring grass covered the earth like a soft memory. She knelt there for a long while. Then something moved across the clearing. Emma raised her binoculars, and her breath caught in her throat. Sage. Alone. Standing still in the exact spot where Bramble had collapsed. She sniffed the air, slowly circled the area. Her claws scraped at the dirt once, twice. Then she lay down. Not in distress. Not in weakness. In silence. In reverence. It was as if she remembered not just the place, but the moment. The roar. The blood. The sacrifice. And the love that had delivered her from death. Sage stayed there until the sky began to turn violet. Then she rose, shook the earth from her fur, and padded into the trees once more, disappearing for the last time. Emma never saw her again. But the trail cameras captured occasional glimpses, a lone female grizzly fishing at the river, napping beneath the tall birches, sometimes carrying pine branches in her mouth like offerings. She never bonded with another bear. She never returned to the rehab center. But she survived. And every spring, when the first flowers bloomed near the old observation blind, a single stone would be found, moved, placed gently at the edge of the clearing, sometimes with a paw print in the mud beside it. Because love leaves tracks in the wild. And some spirits, even in death, remain guardians of the hearts they protected.